Yeah, here's our intro. Ready?
Ready.
Fun. Welcome to Winding Down with with Padre. Why is that so hard for me to get? Welcome down to Winding Down with Padre. I'm Father Michael.
And I'm Father White. And we are talking about...
We're getting serious.
It's time to talk more about politics and religion.
Yeah. I think we're, I think we're drawing a line in the sand this time. I need a cheers.
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 What are we drinking?
Today we're drinking...
Ooh.
Syrah. I like Syrah.
Yeah, I don't
The
think
Smoking
Syrah's a whole lot.
Loon.
Smoking loon.
Show the camera.
Not a smoking gun. Smoking loon.
The Smoking Loon.
Yeah.
Pretty
so,
good.
I haven't had a
Is that
taste
from
yet.
a sponsor?
I
Or did
don't-
we buy that one on our own?
I don't know. If you did sponsor us, we want to thank you
I think we bought that one.
helping us bring this topic to fruition.
Okay, so today
Pun intended.
we're getting into
Yeah,
a
so
little
last
bit
time
more.
you left us hanging.
We're kind of diving a little bit more
Man.
into it. So
Yeah.
last time,
I felt last time was kind of a foundation, just a primer, just to get us on the same page. We talked about having a charitable conversation where we can talk about issues without getting heated and just have a good dialogue.
yeah, and we just kind of addressed a few of the general moral principles. So if you want to catch up, that's still on our Facebook page. You can go to the playlist for Church and State and catch up on our discussion for last week. But today we're going to get into the first non-negotiable, and in fact the most important of all the non-negotiables. So this very well could be our most important topic. In fact, our most important video. So I hope we don't mess up. There's a lot of pressure.
Listen, we've been messing up this whole time, so no pressure at all. But no, I'm glad you said that because in the reading and research and just talking about it, I don't know if I really knew that there was like a hierarchy of principles, or there was like principles that were more important when we were considering candidates than others, because there's so many principles, right? So many things that politicians talk about, that policies of implementation, but last time we talked about the difference between principles and policies, right? Policies are the way that you implement principles, or you implement different ways that the society can experience maybe these principles. But as I'm reading, I'm like, wow, this makes total sense. Like it helps guide at least me in my voting.
Yeah, there's definitely an order. Some things are in fact more important than others, which is not surprising because that's the way we live our lives. There are some things that are essential, like food and water and shelter, and some things that are luxuries, like a television, which we're grateful to have, but and internet.
Right.
You know, but of course, food is going to be more important because that's just it speaks to our essential needs, and it's the same way in the spiritual life and the moral life. So.
Yeah. So last time you left us hanging. I was
Left us
so
hanging.
excited. So when are you going to tell us?
Okay,
what's the non-negotiable?
So okay, the non-negotiable we're talking about today is the dignity of every human life, from conception to natural death. But before we really jump into why that is a non-negotiable and why that is the most important one, I think we need to spend some time on what is this language of non-negotiable? Where does this come from? Why are we even saying that? It sounds kind of harsh. It sounds kind of outdated.
Sure.
It sounds like someone who's not willing to be open-minded.
Right, lack of flexibility, right?
So this really comes from this language kind of became in the popular Catholic world after Pope Benedict in 2006 gave an address to the European Parliament. And Pope Benedict was the pope before Pope Francis. He's actually still alive. And he kind of, through his research and summarized all the church documents on political and social responsibility. And he presented to the European Parliament that there are 3 non-negotiables when it comes to supporting the common good, which he says is the primary purpose of political responsibility. We have to promote the common good.
Yeah.
So in order to promote the common good, we need to know what the common good is and how to do it. And that, he says, fundamentally, and it's not just he that says this, the church has always said this, fundamentally the common good is about promoting the human dignity of every person. That's the reason the church cares about this issue. And so he lists these three common goods as the protection of life in all of its stages. So protection of every single human life from conception to natural death. That's being the very first one. That's what we'll spend the rest of this video on. But as a teaser, the second one would be the recognition and promotion of the natural structure of the family. So family being a second non-negotiable. We really need to protect and promote the dignity of the family. And the third being the right of parents to educate their children, which is very connected to the family. So those are ones that we'll definitely get to later, but today we need to talk about the primary one being human dignity, which comes to us from the book of Genesis.
Yeah, in Genesis it says how like God is speaking. It says, let us make man and woman in our image and likeness. So like there's an incredible dignity inherent in the way that we're made. We're made with a purpose, with a design. And the beauty of our faith, of the Christian faith, is that we see and can hear the design that God has for us. And how wonderful it is in America, where we have the freedom of religion to where we can hear our design being proclaimed to us, and then we live in a culture where we can actually allow that design to happen without any coercion or without any resistance or without any oppression over us. And even our Constitution, like our slogan, a nation under God. So like we live in at least a Christian nation right now. But all the more reason us having this conversation of if we are not a nation under God, like if we don't allow Christian principles, or at least the dignity of how we're made to be the guiding principle of our policies, then what are we under? You know?
I just love that you said that God made us on purpose. Because who we are is that, like, we are cared for by God. Like, we weren't an accident. God made us on purpose, and that's at the very beginning of the Bible. And because we were made on purpose, like, we have to value the fact that we did not create ourselves, but that our life is a gift. And we don't want to destroy that gift. In fact, in order to receive all the other gifts that God has for us, we kind of need to be alive. So, and we were made so that we could live eternally with God. But the entryway is through this life first.
Sure.
So as you bring that up, I mean, just the culture of life, again, it's what God intended from the very beginning.
Sure. And the Christian lens is, and not just some people, it's all people. It doesn't segregate. It doesn't disqualify any nation, any race. It's just the human person.
Right.
It sees them from conception. You know, we're gonna talk about this, to natural death. It's all encompassing. It's
every single human
beauty.
person, no matter what country you're from, no matter how old you are, no matter what gender you are, like, you still have that human dignity that you possess, and there's something to say about that.
So how important it is that we're having this conversation, and that we bring this principle up at the beginning as we talk about, like, non-negotiables.
Yeah, and it's the very foundation for promoting the common good.
Would it be fair to say that protection of life in all its stages, is that the term that's commonly referred to as, like, being pro-life? Is that the same? Is it kind of synonymous? Is that just kind of the catchphrase?
Yeah, pro-life, absolutely. And you know, it's funny how ironic that we call it pro-life and pro-choice, as if because choosing is a good thing, but it's really, ultimately, we have to call it for what it is. It's pro-life and pro-death. And although this is a very sensitive issue, and we definitely want to recognize we're on holy ground here, that some of these topics may hit close to home for some of our viewers, and for many Catholics. But nonetheless, that does not take away from the fact that although we're going to be as pastoral as we can and proclaim the mercy of God, we still need to promote pro-life things. We still need to promote the dignity of every human life, because to take an innocent human life for any reason, at all, it is never okay. So
Sure.
this is a little bit more than just abortion, though, because we talk a lot about abortion.
Yep.
But
Pro-life is yes. So what would a pro-life, a protection of human life and human dignity, what's the span, the spectrum that would cover? Like, what are some issues that would cover?
yeah, again, pro-life covers conception to natural death, and we're talking about the taking of innocent life. So in other words, yes, there's a lot of issues that affect our lives indirectly. Healthcare, immigration, economy, and those are issues that we'll get to later. But the direct, intentional killing of innocent human life anywhere between conception and natural death would not be okay. And so that includes abortion. It also includes euthanasia, which we ironically call mercy killing, but it's not merciful. You're taking an innocent life away. It also includes stem cell research, believe it or not. Now, not all stem cell research technically does this, but a lot of stem cell research takes innocent human life, because what they do is they take embryos that have already been fertilized, so they have already been conceived, and then they'll do research on it, or sometimes they'll take the pieces of an aborted baby. So these types of stem cell research procedures are, in order to be done, were being done by the taking of a innocent human life, and we just cannot support it. Even though a potential good might come from it, it does not, like the ends just
Sure.
simply does not.
Or
justify the
indirectly
means.
using indirectly an aborted fetus, using that material for stem cell, even though the act has already been.
Yeah, you would say, well, let's at least make a little bit of good come from it.
Right.
But again, the ends does not justify the means.
Sure.
And if we truly believe in the dignity of human life, in the event that there is an aborted fetus, that we do have the ability to choose what to do with it,
Sure.
we should bury it, because it is still a dignified human person that has now died. So we take very seriously the dignity of human life. And again, there's all these arguments that we could go with apologetics on, whether or not an abortion is justified by a certain woman's choice, depending on her healthcare situation. And I'm not sure if we really want to dive deep into those today, but they're definitely.
Yeah, we're just talking about principles, and if the principle is to uphold the dignity of human life. I know cloning is also part of that.
Yeah, again, because cloning, what we're doing is that we're separating the conception of life from its natural creation, where we are suddenly playing God, and we believe that, like, God implants the soul at conception, like through our cooperation, and a lot of times what will happen with cloning is suddenly we are like just kind of messing with like genetically modifying a lot of our dignified parts. We're putting ourselves at jeopardy. So it's a very slippery slope with cloning. It's a very dangerous thing to get into. So again, it just does not respect our human dignity.
Sure.
So this is a primary issue, because if you're not alive, then you cannot benefit from the common good. You cannot benefit from political discussion and political policies. So, like, it's fundamental to every other policy. Just as we say that that charity is the mother of all virtues, or that pride is the mother of all sins, we can say that the dignity of human life is the mother of every single political issue, because it's the foundation for it.
Sure. So when we distinguish it between negotiable and non-negotiable, like what are we saying? Like that there's a hierarchy, that there's a primacy, that there's, like, all issues are not equal, and that this is above and beyond all issues.
There is, truth to say that there are some issues that are more important, and this one being the most important. And we are not single issue voters. The bishops of the United States have articulated that. We are not single issue voters. However, we do recognize that not all issues are equal. And since not all issues are equal, we are able to say that some are more important, and there is in fact one that is most important. And so you can't compare apples and oranges. You have to recognize that the dignity of human life is our first and primary principle whenever we approach political discussion.
Sure. So we would be looking for a candidate who upholds policies that respect human dignity, the dignity of the human person. Now, again, I think we talked about there's principles, and then there's policies, how we implement those principles. What would I guess in an ideal world, we have two candidates who actually uphold the principle of human dignity, and then we want to see, okay, how are they going to implement this? And so we would be able to distinguish, okay, two goods, how are they going to implement these two goods? However, in some voting, we have two candidates who stand for two different things. So one can agree and stand for this principle, and another one that doesn't agree. So we would say like a pro-life candidate
And a pro-choice
and a
candidate.
pro-choice candidate.
And the classic question being, well, the pro-choice candidate has really great policies in some of the other issues, and the pro-life candidate, maybe we don't really like their issues, and so now we have a sticky dilemma. What do we do?
Yeah. So it seems to me that the church says, because it's a non-negotiable, and this is a priority. Catholic principles would teach us to promote the pro-life, the pro-dignity politician, because this is such an important issue, because all other issues flow from it, versus making the smaller issues trump this major issue. So I think the church would say we're called to vote a pro-life position,
Right.
First and foremost, right?
I think for many people, they may wonder, well, why is it such a big deal whether they're pro-life, pro-choice? The majority of what your governor or your president or even your senator is going to be talking about is going to be on the other issues. So somebody may argue, well, there's going to be a greater amount of good that will occur in all the other issues, and they may just make one pro-choice decision, and we'll just count our losses because of all these other things. And so that's a hard thing to argue, but what we're saying is, if you are pro-choice, that there is a worldview of which you approach all of your other decisions, and you're promoting a culture of life and death. And because it is such a fundamental issue, we need every single person, whether you're not even influential at all in politics and you're just a normal citizen, or you're the president of the United States, we all have a role to play to build the culture of life. And at the end of the day, we're either promoting the culture of life or the culture of death, and it's our turn to decide. So it is an important thing. So it's unfortunate whenever you have a pro-life candidate who seems to be a weaker candidate, and a pro-choice candidate who seems to be a stronger candidate. But at the end of the day, a pro-life candidate is in fact promoting that primary issue for us. And even though we may have personal interests in other ways, in other sectors, that particular issue is in fact foundational to our beliefs about who we are and who God is.
Right. So in an ideal world, our voting would be made easy. We have a pro-life candidate, a pro-choice candidate. Our Catholic non-negotiable primary principle is to promote the pro-life candidate and the culture of being pro-life. But what happens if you have two candidates who are not pro-life, but they're both pro-choice?
Yeah, what do you do?
What do you do? I mean, can I even vote for a pro-choice candidate? Is it a sin to vote for a pro-choice candidate? What would guide our voting, or what does the Catholic Church say about that?
Yeah, in fact, I have to give a shout out to one of our viewers who kind of asked this question last week, and so I'm glad that we can kind of address it this time. But the United States bishops, the USCCB, they write a document every election season, or they update this document every election season, called Forming Consciences for Faithful Citizenship. And in this document, paragraph, I'm forgetting, like 35, they say this, and it's very interesting. They say there may be There may be times when a Catholic who rejects a candidate's unacceptable position, even on policies promoting an intrinsically evil act, such as
Yep.
abortion, may reasonably decide to vote for that candidate for other morally grave reasons. And voting in this way would be permissible only for truly grave moral reasons, not to advance narrow interests or partisan preferences, or to ignore a fundamental moral evil. But it goes on to say that, like, when both candidates hold a position that promotes an intrinsically evil act, we are faced with a dilemma. That is difficult. And they even say that some will take the extraordinary act of, and when I say extraordinary, the extraordinary act of just not voting at all, because their conscience, which they formed well, has told them, I just cannot support either of them. And you know what? Like, if that is what your conscience tells you based off of forming it well and to the best of your ability, then that's praiseworthy, because you are not going against the culture of life here. But they also say that it is permissible to vote for the candidate that you, after doing your due diligence of research, would give a lesser degree of harm in their practice. So you're not necessarily comparing their moral qualities or their character qualities, personal qualities. You're comparing their policy qualities, like what is their public character, not their personal character, but what is their public character. Although personal character is important, what's most important is what does their resume say, and will they actually promote a culture of life or death, or if they're both promoting a culture of death, which one's more aggressive, and which one may not be as aggressive is
So
the question to ask.
yeah, so if you have, so I guess to simplify that, I don't know if I'm hearing that right. Two pro-choice candidates, you would basically be allowed to vote for the, I don't want to say the lesser of the evils, but the one who would promote a culture of death in the least regard, like
Right.
the.
But that's only permissible if they're both pro-choice.
Right.
So that's a really important key, because what the bishops are saying is only for morally grave reasons are we able to vote for a pro-choice candidate. And a morally grave reason is not if one's pro-life and one's pro-choice, and the pro-choice you just like him better. That's not morally grave, because foundationally it's the pro-life issue that is the gravest. So it's only because otherwise you'd be doing apples and oranges again. But it's whenever they're both pro-choice, then it's possible in good conscience to vote for the lesser of two evils, but not required.
Sure.
It's also possible to conscientiously decide that you cannot vote.
Sure. Again, because we're shaping a culture, we're shaping a society by what we vote on, right? We always say this in the parish, like what we celebrate is what gets,
Yeah, it's what's magnified.
Formed, right? It's
Yeah.
what magnifies. So
What we
vote
focus
on is
on
saying
grows.
what's important.
Right, and that kind of slips into the discussion about laws too. Sometimes there's a situation where like a senator, for example, or a congressman would be faced to vote for a law that is deemed, quote unquote, a pro-choice law. It's a law that permits abortion. But we need to ask what context this is happening, because sometimes the reason that they'll vote for this law is not because they're trying to advance pro-choice, culture, but rather that they're trying to place limits, and this is a first step in the right direction. So it's a law that would provide restrictions, although it doesn't, because it's not possible yet to completely abolish abortion. And so St. John Paul II actually brings that up as well in his encyclical, The Gospel of Life, where he says, when it is not possible to overturn or completely abrogate a pro-abortion law, an elected official whose absolute personal opposition to abortion is well known can licitly support this proposed limiting harm. So this proposed law that's limiting abortions, even though it's considered a pro-choice law. So again, that's only whenever your options are between two pro-choice options, either a more more accessible pro-choice law or a more restrictive pro-choice law, it is possible to therefore vote for the one that's more restrictive.
Sure.
Um,
And we've had that a lot lately, come up in the Supreme Court and in our state. And just to, I mean, to clarify what is obvious, but when we talk about abortion, we're talking about anything that prohibits the birth of a child from the moment of conception to natural birth. So it can be anything like the morning after pill. It can be artificial contraception. It can be like abortion at any stage of the game. That would be abortion. And so what you're saying is if there are laws that if we just can't get all the way to say like abortion is prohibited, pro-life candidates can actually vote for laws that at least move our policies to protect a child further along in the developmental process, and it's morally permissible because we're moving in the right
we
direction.
need to take steps, exactly. But it's never okay to intend the pro-choice result.
Sure.
The intention is important as a personal
It's the
Catholic.
movement.
Your intention is a strategy to eliminate it eventually.
Yeah.
So there's a lot at stake, always, particularly since the genesis of the discussion about Roe v. Wade
Right.
years ago. But today, like there's still, sometimes it's not right there in the news media, but there's laws all the time at our local levels, at our state levels, and even things that go all the way to the Supreme Court.
Right. Let's talk about the Supreme Court. So I know, like we have a presidential election coming up, and I know, like the president has power. Like the president has power to elect Supreme Court officials, and a lot of these court cases and laws go up. They're appealed to the Supreme Court. And we have these justices who are interpreting laws, and obviously the law isn't so black and white as we think it might be because
Right.
it's never a vote. Was it 7 or 9?
It's 9.
9.
Yeah.
Like it's never 9-0. It's sometimes it's
Very often it's
5
5
to
to
4, and it's just like, okay, how?
Yeah, and it's unfortunate that even the Supreme Court now, you can almost kind of identify each justice according to a certain party, which is unfortunate. That's just the way that our system is kind of developed. But essentially their role is to interpret the Constitution, interpret laws according to the Constitution. Sure. And in the balance of power, the President of the United States has the ability to appoint justices, not just on the Supreme Court, but also on federal court and circuit courts. And all of these justices have the ability to interpret laws. So while we vote for our senators that write the law, our congressmen, House representatives and senators, the President of the United States is the one that appoints these justices. So
you can see the influence that
there's an extreme
a
influence.
presidential election has on the interpretation of the law.
Exactly, and so that is something that we
of-
can take into account whenever we go to the presidential election. Is that's one thing that's at stake. Is that if our Supreme Court justices are on board with a culture of death and not a culture of life, there's going to be some major ramifications. But if we have more Supreme Court justices that are pro-life, well, that's very helpful, and something that we should definitely strive for.
Sure. So non-negotiable, our first non-negotiable that we bring to the table is a culture of life, upholding the human dignity. Very important. So we've said that among all of the possible issues that will be brought up as we look at elections, whether it's presidential, whether it's local government, this is our first and foremost most important. If there's not it's not one among many. It's at the top because it cascades in the way that we look and interpret all of the other issues, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it's foundational for all the other issues. And we're going to definitely get into the other issues because, again, we're not a single issue voter. We are not single issue voters. But we do recognize that there are some issues that are more important than others. And the dignity of human life from conception to natural death is the primary issue. So part of it is we got to do our research, particularly because it is so sensitive and because it does touch on a lot of people's sensitivities. Sometimes it's hard to find like real research of what's actually going on. So we definitely have a few suggestions. Again, our ewtn.com/vote is our primary resource that we're using to kind of navigate these waters of political discussion. There's also an organization called Catholic Vote that gives you a daily email that kind of keeps you up to date on just all the issues that are happening globally and nationally. And they just give you like the quick links and a quick update every day, but through a Catholic lens and through a pro-life lens. So it is very helpful. Sometimes I get stories in these emails about, oh, there is a law in Louisiana that is up for discussion that concerns pro-life issues. So a very helpful resource. And then a third one being the United States Catholic Bishops resource on forming consciences for faithful citizenship. That's another document that you can kind of dive deep into.
Sure. And I guess maybe before we close, now that you say the resources, I'm just thinking: is it clear? Is it easy to find out if a candidate's like pro-life or pro-choice? Because
it's a great question.
If it's just so easy, I just find that sometimes you listen to a candidate and you're like, I'm not quite sure what they're trying to say, because I find that some candidates can try to make what sounds like I am pro-life because, like for example,
well, the pro-life, like the pro-choice argument is I'm pro-life because I'm pro-woman and I'm trying to provide women's health and therefore I'm pro-life.
Or healthcare, like I'm pro-life because I want to respect the dignity of use the language. I want to respect the dignity of the person, and if they want to take their own life, I want to respect their ability to take their own life, and I want to support them in that. And so I am pro-life. And so like I'll use the language.
I'm glad you brought that up. It's true. It is sometimes difficult to know. Thankfully, the resources we provided can kind of help you navigate those waters, but at the end of the day, it's the resume. The resume will say, I mean, you can get up on stage and say that you're pro-life, but I need to know in your past what laws have you voted for or against if you've been a congressman. What efforts have you actually made? Who are the people you spend time with, and kind of are you in the pro-life circle? Do you have you spoken at the March for Life conference? So there are ways, there's resumes to kind of look at, but you're right, sometimes it's hard to just hear the language, and so it's definitely something that we need to together kind of approach with a critical mind. Like we have to do our own critical thinking and research to see, is this person actually pro-life, or are they just trying to get your vote because they know that you're pro-life?
Yeah, it takes a little work.
It does.
Certainly in this presidential election coming up, I mean, we do have evidence out there of the candidates that we'll be looking at. We can look at their voting resume and see how they kind of the disposition that they've taken and what kind of culture, as we talk about a culture of life, what kind of culture they're trying to disseminate. So
yeah, I mean, on that note, there's another resource called priestsforlife.org, and it's an organization of priests who their apostolate is promoting the pro-life culture. So they do get a little bit deeper into the political discussion and like the research, particularly on this issue. So if you want to like read up a little bit more into the weeds on that, it's another resource that you can look into.
This has been fun.
Whew. I hope we didn't say anything we regret.
A line in the sand. I wish I would have felt like I was at the beach. Maybe we can put some
knee deep in the water somewhere. Got the.
I felt like we were waist deep in the water. Maybe we can do like some background noise of the waves crashing.
Ooh, some editing skills.
When I say yeah.
How's your iMovie editing skills?
That's my eye. I mean, I can.
Okay.
I can work the eye, but not the iMovie.
You're crazy.
Well, Feels
Okay,
spicy.
well, join us next week. We're going to go into the second non-negotiable.
Did you say it? I think you did say it
I
at one
did.
point.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the family unit.
Ooh.
Marriage and family. That's a pretty big topic.
It just continues to be spicy. Who thought family unit could be spicy?
It's going to be spicy.
Jeez,
Yes.
I can't wait. I might start drinking now just to prepare for the next one.
You know, I'm going to encourage you to drink in moderation.